So I just came back from a massive movie screening at a food forest, 50 acres in Galt Landing, which you can definitely check out for yourself. I did a tour video on that. I'm also doing a movie review of the Jones Plantation, so stay tuned for that. You know, there's so many great people coming together. You can see I have some mosquito bites, but we solved that too with the toilet paper plant that he had there. We were rubbing that on our skin. Awesome stuff, very inspiring. I saw some of you guys there because I shared the event with you guys. You can also find more events that are going on. I'm going to be planning a lot more real life events, don't worry, at the liberator.us. The liberator.us, basically a one-stop hub for everything. That's why I created it. Now, this article that we're going to be talking about today is rather important. It's the horror of utopia. Okay, this is an article written by William H. Douglas of the LatterdayLiberator.com, my co-editor for the Liberator 2. We're trying to bring back the abolitionist voices of the past, those who wanted to end slavery. Very on par and on topic with that movie, The Jones Plantation, which if you haven't seen that movie yet, I do recommend you check it out. It's very much on point with what we're going to be talking about in this video. So, in the last edition of the Liberator 2, one of my previous videos, we continued exploring Dr. Carl Jung's insights into the origins of the state and its effects on myriad aspects of society as found in his last great work, The Undiscovered Self. In the previous edition, we explored Dr. Jung's observation that rivalry for power and exaggerated distrust pervade the entire organism of the government from top to bottom. This is what he said on page 9. Because of the effects of the doctrine of the state, he called it, on the minds of those who believed it. He then extended his observations there to society as a whole. The results were obvious. The state was the greatest source of conflict, hatred, chaos, and violence in society. And that is before we consider the mass insanity and incomprehensible slaughter caused by its warmongering. In this article, we will build on these insights by exploring the way that the government causes chaos working to its benefit. Quote, "Furthermore, in order to compensate for its chaotic formlessness, a mass always produces a leader who almost infallibly becomes the victim of his own inflated ego consciousness, as numerous examples in history show. This development becomes logically unavoidable the moment the individual masses together with others and becomes obsolete. Apart from agglomerations of huge masses of people in which the individual disappears anyway, one of the chief factors responsible for psychological mass-mindedness is scientific rationalism, which robs the individual of his foundations and his dignity. As a social unit, he has lost his individuality and becomes a mere abstract number in the Bureau of Statistics. He can only play the role of an interchangeable unit of infinitesimal importance. Looked at rationally and from outside, that is exactly what he is, and from this point of view, it seems positively absurd to go on talking about the value or meaning of the individual. Indeed, one can hardly imagine how one ever came to endow individual human life with so much dignity, when the truth to the contrary is as plain as the palm of your hand." So that's from pages 9 and 10 of The Undiscovered Self. Many modern biologists argue that hierarchy in human life is a natural product of our biology, that we naturally want to order society in a way where everyone knows and understands their place relative to everyone else, and where we know those in authority, who they are and who they are not. Dr. Jung seems to be saying something similar here. Out of the chaos of human relationships, especially those organized by the state, where our natural inclination towards competition and rivalry is exacerbated exponentially by the contradictory nature of living in a statist society, as discussed in our last article, humans naturally seek someone to take control, to tell them what to do, and to promise to fix everything. We want a leader. The problem is that in order to do this, we must submit our individuality to the demands of the group. We must fit within the ideological and social confines of the group if we wish to belong. We must give up our individuality for the collective, the individual for the state, and by doing so, imbue the leader with the power he or she needs to rule. the resulting abdication of individuality and responsibility caused by this, Dr. Jung labels mass-mindedness. But it is similar to the description of groupthink. As people are consumed in the identity of the group, they reject information that would contradict what the group teaches, and they suppress their own thoughts when those thoughts might challenge their belief in the doctrines and dogmas of the group. Therefore, while claiming to be an individual, those who have given themselves to collectivist beliefs are actively working on obliterating their individuality, while claiming to champion liberty. They are, in fact, proposing slavery, in its power to use violent force to compel mass obedience. In this, I am also reminded of George Orwell's definition of doublethink as given in his seminal work 1984. Quote, "To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting them both." We might see this with individuals not obeying their conscience and following an authority figure, as in the case of World War II, for instance. So political mass-mindedness or groupthink necessitates doublethink. Otherwise, one could not in good morality support the state, as it is founded on violence, brutality, and control. Every law is backed by such. So with it, one can ignore all the horrors that result from their actions, believing then the results of some imaginary other enemy, Democrats, Republicans, terrorists, late-stage capitalists, etc. Dr. Jung further explicates the dehumanizing effect of reducing individuals to scientifically defined and studied statistics that the state engages in to function. Having forfeited your individuality or had being stolen through decades of indoctrination, the result is the loss of the individual's dignity and worth. After all, as a collective, you are not a person with thought and feelings, hopes and dreams, life and liberty. You're a number. Not even enough to qualify as a rounding error. Quote, "Why should I care about a number, especially one so minuscule? Why should we let numbers get in the way of utopia?" Seen from this standpoint, the individual really is of diminishing importance, and anyone who wished to dispute this would soon find himself at a loss for arguments. The fact that the individual feels himself or the members of his family or the esteemed friends in his circle to be important merely underlines the slightly comic subjectivity of his feeling. For what are the few compared with 10,000 or 100,000, let alone a million? This recalls the argument of a thoughtful friend with whom I once got caught up in a huge crowd of people. Suddenly he exclaimed, "Here you have the most convincing reason for not believing in immortality. All those people want to be immortal." That's from page 10. So in such dehumanizing conditions, is it any surprise that people are dehumanized? Is it any surprise that people can champion the murdering of children when each is merely thought of in a purely scientific, rationalist approach, as a clump of cells that is one among billions? Is it any surprise that people can champion the murdering of millions of people across the world as long as it doesn't affect someone they know? Is it any surprise that people can see themselves as a champion of racial minorities in their country while supporting a government actively murdering millions of non-white people all over the world in the War on Terror? Those abstract numbers being eliminated aren't people with hopes and dreams, with a divine history and eternal promise within them. They're just statistics to be shuffled from one category to another. Likewise, is it no surprise then that the state power is increased, justified on the way that it may affect the collective mass numbers, no matter how much it may destroy the individual? As Joseph Stalin is reported to have said during the Holodomor, the Ukrainian genocide caused by Stalin's socialist agricultural policies, he says, "One death is a tragedy. A million is a statistic." I think this is insane, but this is the world we live in. We want to dehumanize ourselves into robots to just simply follow orders and ignore our own conscience and not think for ourselves. That is amazing. It's actually horrible. It's a really amazing in the fact that Stanley Milgram also detailed this, and he has psychological experiments which are banned. You can't do them anymore, but they've been repeated all across the world with the same exact results. That over 90% of people were willing to abandon their conscience and what they know to be right, as opposed to wrong, just to follow some authority they perceive to be an authority figure. This is what Larkin Rose calls the most dangerous superstition, and yet there's nobody in psychology really talking about it. There's a lot of people in independent media who just ignore it or don't talk about it or even know, and most people in the world in mainstream media or anybody don't talk about it or know about it because it involves education, involves facing our own mindset. It's not an easy thing to address in our psyche. But it's not actually natural as part of humankind to fall into this statist doctrine. Because I talk about in my video on the banned psychological experiments, well, how did we get there? It started with a schooling indoctrination program where we actually go through school and we learn to obey orders. We learn to just do what we're told. We're not told to do what is right at all times within our life. We inside know what is right, and a lot of people do know, and a lot of people say they want kindness in the world, but at the same time, this doublethink, they allow violence, and they don't even know that they do because they support government politics and politicians and laws, and all that legitimizes statism, the belief system that is responsible for the violence, which again is how every proceeding of the government takes place. So even if you were to vote in a good politician, you're still legitimizing the ability that somebody should be in that position to dehumanize others, to have this collectivist mindset that Dr. Jung is warning us about. And when you give credence into that, you lose the individual, you lose your freedom, you lose who you're meant to be, and you are meant to be free. Thank you very much for watching. This is Corey Angelot. Nature is the answer. Go to theliberator.us. That's theliberator.us. Send us your article. I'll turn it into a video for you. Thank you for watching.